said, "Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." As Wayne mentioned last week, Eve adds to God's law by falsely charging that God forbade even the touching of the tree. This reflects in Eve a very low regard for God's law, doesn't it? Someone with a high regard for God is going to have a high regard for His wishes. And someone with a high regard for God's wishes is going to have a high regard for God's law, which is where those wishes are contained. Therefore, someone who adds to or subtracts from God's word, as Eve does, is someone with a very low regard for God Himself. Therefore, we see that Eve was already inclined toward evil before she even entered into that conversation with Satan. And it was her evil heart that a few moments later would lead to the death of all mankind. So we've talked about Judas, we've talked about Eve. Now let's talk about us. Let's talk about mankind in general. All of mankind is influenced by Satan in his mind, will, and heart. And he doesn't want you to know that, but I'm telling you right now. Satan's influence is not reserved for Eve and Judas, but is a threat to all mankind, including Christians. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, Paul says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Even for those who are converted, a wrestling match remains against the rulers of darkness in this life. 1 Peter chapter 5, Peter says, and Peter should know, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world." Why would Peter encourage Christians all over the world to be sober, vigilant, and steadfast if Satan were not a threat? Satan knows that men do whatever their mind, their will, and their heart tell them to do. Therefore, if Satan can influence a man's mind, will, and heart toward evil, he can be fairly confident that that evil will be done. Satan blinds men's minds to the truth. In 2 Corinthians 4:4, it says, "In whom the God of this world," meaning Satan, "hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them." So in other words, if Satan can get men to think the wrong things, he's pretty sure he can influence them to do the wrong things. But also Satan ensnares the will of man. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 26. Paul says that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will. In other words, if Satan can get men to desire the wrong things, he can influence them to do the wrong things. And then finally, Satan troubles the heart of man to do his will. Our feelings and our affections are affected by Satan. 1 Samuel 16 says that the Spirit of the Lord departed from King Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. An evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. So in other words, if Satan can get men to feel bad about doing good things, things and feel good about doing bad things, then he can easily influence men to do the wrong things. You see, Satan's influence over men is comprehensive over all aspects of their flesh, mind, will, and heart. He uses every facet available to him to influence men to do evil. And remember that Satan has the power to influence men to do evil because mankind's heart is already inclined to do evil. But now let's leave the topic of Satan and his influence over man and talk about God's sovereignty over Satan. You see, God allowed Satan to influence Judas to do this deed. Judas determined in his heart to do a very evil thing, and he is guilty of that evil. However, this evil deed was instrumental in bringing about what God had already determined. Every circumstantial detail of the death of Jesus Christ was determined before the foundation of the world. In Acts chapter 2, verse 22, Peter preaches, "Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also know, him being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye have taken, and by wicked hands have crucified and slain." Who crucified Jesus? The men of Israel. Who betrayed Jesus to the men of Israel? Judas. Who influenced Judas to betray Jesus to the men of Israel? Satan. But who allowed Satan to influence Judas to betray Jesus to the men of Israel? God. John chapter 13, verse 21. Jesus said to his apostles at the Last Supper, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it." And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot. Jesus was fully aware of what was going on, yet he did nothing about it. How many times in the book of Luke have we seen it demonstrated that Jesus had sovereign power over Satan and his demons? But in this instance, he allowed Satan to do his job. Why? Because Satan had a role to play in the bringing about of God's ultimate glory. The glory of Jesus Christ and his work. If there was no death of Jesus, there would be no resurrection, would there? And with no resurrection, there is no glory of God. Judas is not alone, though. God allowed Eve to be influenced by Satan to do her evil deed as well. Eve premeditatedly determined to do a very evil thing, and she is guilty of that evil thing. However, God did not restrain Eve from following through with her determination, because the evil deed was instrumental in bringing about what God had already determined before the foundation of the world. I mean, think about it. If God predetermined that his Son would die for the sinfulness of mankind, which we just read in Acts chapter 2, then he must have also predetermined that mankind would become sinful. And if he predetermined that mankind would be sinful, he must have predetermined the fall of mankind from its original created righteousness. Now, this is very important, and this is one of the aspects, again, that Satan does not want you to know. And he will, if you give him opportunity, he'll take these words right out of your mind the minute you leave here today.